Howdy, macroeconomics folks. I promised you that I would make a video and show you how to do some of the problems with unemployment, the different kinds of unemployment. I need to grab a calculator real quick. All right, and you probably are going to need a calculator as well. So here's a few examples. None of these are off the worksheet that I gave you, but they're very similar to the ones that you have on the worksheet. Now, before we actually do some of these problems, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some notes over top of all of these of what they are, what some of them are equal to. Probably the most important one here is the unemployment rate. In fact, let me go through all this stuff. We've got the total population of an economy. Let's say a country, but we'll say an economy. We've got the total population of an economy, those that are employed, those that are unemployed, and those that are not in the labor force. Now, total population is equal to the employed plus the unemployed plus those who are not in the labor force. Okay? So if you just add up these three numbers, you get that number. So like in this first one here, if you want to know what this number is, you can basically just subtract these two numbers from that number, and that'll tell you this number, because this number is these three numbers added up. Okay? All right. Now, then we have full employment, the full employment percentage, or what the economy would consider the percentage that the percentage of unemployment that is considered to be full employment, which is the same thing as the natural rate of unemployment. So, the full employment percentage is the same thing as the natural rate of unemployment, so you're just going to put the same number in both of these places every single time. Okay? All right? Now here is the unemployment rate, and the unemployment rate is the overall unemployment rate. We'll talk about the calculation for that in just a second. But then we have structural unemployment, frictional unemployment, and cyclical unemployment. And one of the first things you need to understand is that the unemployment rate, the overall unemployment rate, is equal to the structural rate plus the frictional rate plus the cyclical rate. So if you just add these three percentages up, that equals your overall unemployment rate. Similarly, speaking of adding things up, the natural rate of unemployment, which is equal to full employment, is equal to structural plus frictional. If you add the structural rate plus the frictional rate, that gives you the natural rate of unemployment. It's basically, the natural rate of unemployment is basically the unemployment rate minus the cyclical rate. If you took cyclical unemployment out of the unemployment rate, you would have the natural rate of unemployment. Because the unemployment rate is made up of all three kinds of unemployment, but the natural rate of unemployment is only made up of two of the kinds of unemployment. These are the good unemployments, so to speak, and this is the bad unemployment. Okay? All right. I think the last thing we need to know before we really get started here is, how do we calculate the unemployment rate based on the employed, unemployed population and not in labor force? That's the thing you have to understand, is that the unemployment rate is the doorway between the percentages and the populations. So if you want to go from here over to here, you have to do it through the unemployment rate. And the unemployment rate, which we'll call UR, is equal to the unemployed plus, that's not right, the unemployed divided by the employed plus the unemployed. Unemployed plus employed. Because the employed plus the unemployed, that equals the labor force. So there's a column in here it's not missing, but it's just, you could make another column and call it the labor force. You could put it over here, say labor force, and it's going to be this number plus this number. Okay? And the unemployment rate is equal to the number of unemployed people divided by the labor force. Okay? So, given that information, let's see if we can work through some of these problems. All right. Here in this first column, we have a blank here under not in the labor force. Well, basically what we can do is we'll take the total population, subtract away the labor force, and that'll leave those not in the labor force. So we'll do 85 million. And understand, I'm not typing in 85,000,000. I'm just typing in 85. The units are million. Units here, million. The units in all these columns here are millions. Therefore, I can just type in 85. And then after I do my subtraction, I'll just put MIL, million, afterwards. Okay, so 85 minus 52 minus 6.9 gives me 26.1. So that means not in the labor force is 26.1 million people. Okay. Now over here, we don't know. We're told what the frictional unemployment is, and we're told what cyclical unemployment is, but we don't know the natural rate of unemployment or full employment. We don't know the unemployment rate, and we don't know the structural rate of unemployment. Okay. Now, we can't get this number or this number or this number from just these two numbers. So, we're going to have to get these numbers from these numbers over here. And you remember what I said was the gateway from these numbers over to these numbers or backwards? This is the gateway right here. We need to calculate the unemployment rate based on these numbers over here. Well, the unemployment rate is the unemployed, 6.9 million, 6.9, divided by the labor force. We got to add 52 plus 6.9. So 52 plus 6.9 is 58.9. 58.9. So 6.9 people are unemployed, or 6.9 million people are unemployed out of 58.9 people in the labor force. We're not going to worry about the not in the labor force, folks. They're not a part of this calculation. When we do this, we'll do 6.9 divided by 58.9, and we get about 11.7%. It's 0.117, and we're going to turn it into a percentage. So it's 11.7%. So the unemployment rate is 11.7%. 11.7%. Well, we know that the unemployment rate is equal to structural plus frictional plus cyclical. And we know frictional and cyclical. So we really just need to find out what the structural rate is. Well, to find the structural rate, we can just subtract the frictional and the cyclical rates from the overall unemployment rate. So we'll take 11.7 minus 2.8 minus 4.9, and that'll give us 4. So the structural rate is 4%. Now, the only things we have left are natural rate of unemployment and the full employment percentage, which are the same number. And remember what I said earlier? These numbers are the sum of structural and frictional. Okay? Another way to get it would be to take the unemployment rate and subtract the cyclical rate. And I'll show you. Let's add these two together. 4% plus 2.8% is 6.8%. So we know that this is 6.8%. Well, I could have just taken the 11.7 and subtracted the 4.9. Well, 11.7 minus 4.9 is 6.8. So there are two ways that we could have gotten this natural rate of unemployment. And now that we know that this one's the same, 6.8%. Okay? So that's the first row. Let's try this second row right here. We've got a total population of 120 million. There are 30 million people not in the labor force. We have full employment at 4.3%. We don't know the natural rate of unemployment. We don't know the unemployment rate. We have 1.7% structural. We don't know how much frictional, and we have 1% cyclical. Okay, well, let's see what we can do here. I know we can identify the natural rate of unemployment because we know the full employment rate. So it's the same thing, 4.3%, right? The natural rate of unemployment, we know, is equal to structural plus frictional, right? So if we were to add structural plus frictional, so 1.7 plus frictional is going to be equal to 4.3%. So really all we have to do here algebraically is just subtract 1.7. So if we subtract 1.7 from both sides, let's see here, I got 4.3 minus 1.7, whoops, 4.3 minus 1.7, the buttons sometimes don't register, is 2.6%. So we know that the frictional rate is 2.6%. Also, we know that the unemployment rate is equal to the natural rate of unemployment plus the cyclical rate. So we can add this and this together. 4.3% plus 1% is 5.3%. So we're done with this side. Now we just have to work our way over to here. And remember, the doorway from the percentages over to the populations is through the unemployment rate. We know that the unemployment rate is equal to the unemployed divided by the unemployed plus the employed. Okay, and in this case, we know that the unemployment rate is 5.3%. That's 0.053. And we don't know how many unemployed there are, and we don't know how many employed there are. But one thing we do know is, we know what this number is. We know what U plus E is. We don't know what each of the individual numbers are, but we know what the total number is, or we can find the total number, because all we have to do is subtract those not in the labor force from the total population. So 120 million minus 30 million is 90 million. So we know that if we were to add these two numbers together, we would get 90 million. So we know that this is going to be unemployed divided by 90. This is going to take just a couple more steps. If we want to solve this algebraically, we're going to multiply by 90 million on both sides. Okay, so 90 million times 0.053 is 4.77 million. So we know that U is equal to 4.77 million. Well, if the unemployed are 4.77 million and the overall, and E plus U, employed plus unemployed, is equal to 90 million, then all I have to do is subtract 4.77 from 90. So I got 90 minus 4.77, and I get 85.23. So I know that it's 85.23 million. There we go. We just kind of had to work backwards on that one. Let's do one more example, and hopefully you'll have a much better understanding of how to calculate these things on your own. Okay, again, we do not have employed or unemployed. Again, we're given the not in the labor force. We're given the total population. This time, we are not given full employment or the natural rate of unemployment, and we're not given the unemployment rate. But we are given enough information. We are given structural, frictional, and cyclical. Okay, now we know that if you add these two together, that gives you the natural rate of unemployment. And if you add all three of them together, that gives you the unemployment rate overall. So let's go ahead and do that. 0.9 plus 1.3 is 2.2. So that means the natural rate of unemployment is 2.2%, which means full employment is 2.2%. Add all three of them together, and we get 2.7. So the unemployment rate is 2.7%. All right, well, we're done over here. Now, let's go over here, and we got to do the same thing we did last time to try and find the employed and unemployed. We know that the unemployment rate is equal to the unemployed people divided by the unemployed plus the employed. Okay, that's the labor force, right? The unemployed divided by the overall labor force. We know the unemployment rate is 2.7%. That's 0.027, right? Equals unemployed over. And we know the labor force is equal to the population minus those not in the labor force. So 415 million minus 120 million is 295 million. So this is going to be 295. Now we're just going to solve algebraically. Multiply by 295 on both sides. Multiply by 295 on both sides. Cancel, cancel. And the number of unemployed is equal to 295 times 0.027, which is about 7.97. I rounded, but you don't have to round. 7.97 million people. So we know unemployed is 7.97. And so, and we know that overall, the overall labor force is 295 million. So we can just subtract 7.97 from 295 million. minus 7.97. So that means the employed are 287.03. I forgot to put a million here. Million. Okay? All right. Well, I hope this helps a bit. It's very important that you know this equation here. It's also important that you know how to add things up to get the unemployment rate and the natural rate of unemployment. Okay? But I think after this video and after doing a few of these problems, you'll probably be in really good shape. You may also want to consider going back over the entire worksheet to refresh. You know, you can do them all once and then you could do them all again if you want to. Make up your own problems. That's what I did here. I made these three up just kind of out of my head. I started putting some numbers in and trying to figure it out. Okay? Good luck, and I'll see you in class.